So there's lots of different fertility awareness methods. You have basically your mucus-only methods. You have your hormonal methods, which sometimes add something else in, but you're testing urinary hormones. And then you have symptothermal, which is probably what most people know. That's when you're taking your body temperature and you're tracking something else along with it.
Today, I have a special guest with me, Abigail, and she is a fertility awareness instructor and postpartum doula. She works with women in any stage of their fertility journey, but specializes in the postpartum period. And I'm excited to have her on today because we're going to be diving into postpartum nutrition, fertility, and one of the things that we were talking about before we started recording was that, I haven't had children at this point in my life, but I've heard from other clients and other professionals that when you give birth, you're, basically told to prevent a quick pregnancy afterward to go back on birth control. And there's really no other information, education, or insights given into other options. So we're going to be talking about how it's really important to consider other options, regardless of what option you choose, because birth control, especially, we have some interesting studies to share related to taking birth control right after giving birth can increase risk of depression. And there are some other side effects in terms of nutrient depletion and how that will be really important as you just think about your options and also think about if you want to have another kid in the future, timing and making sure that you have enough time to recover and how to do that. So, Abigail, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell us
I'm
a little
excited
bit
to be
about
here.
yourself. I know I gave you a brief intro, but tell us a little bit more about your story, your role as a postpartum doula, a fertility awareness instructor, and how you got into this work. Anything you want to share to start us off?
Like many, it was my own life experience that drove me to this. My second postpartum was extremely rough. I ended up likely with postpartum depression. It wasn't officially diagnosed, but I did a round of progesterone for that. And I had a difficult postpartum and a kid that just had all sorts of issues. And I was really frustrated because, the medical professionals that were supposed to be helping me weren't able to help me. They were just dismissing it as normal. And it was this is not mom's intuition, something's going on here. And so through finding the resources I needed for my kid, I had the passion to become a postpartum doula so that other moms wouldn't have to struggle so much to find the same resources. And then through that, I've been using NFP or fertility awareness methods for 6 or 7 years. And so I was comfortable using them postpartum and talking to other postpartum doulas or just doulas in the space in general. I realized that there wasn't anyone else in my area really teaching fertility awareness. So this wasn't an option available to postpartum women, especially, let alone the general population, but it's got a lot more nuance postpartum. So then I decided to become certified as a fertility awareness instructor so that I could offer that to postpartum clients. And that's become a lot of what I'm doing is working specifically with postpartum women to avoid pregnancy mostly.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about why a woman might want to consider the fertility awareness method versus going on birth control to prevent pregnancy after having a baby.
Yeah. So, right, it is really important to space pregnancies. So, postpartum is not the time to just be, oh, we're just going to do whatever. This is not the time for that because there are associated risks that we'll talk about. But a lot of times what happens is you're in the hospital room postpartum, your midwife or your doctor comes in, they're like, oh, I wrote you a prescription for the mini pill, or, hey, let's talk about an IUD. And that's the whole conversation, which is really frustrating. There are associated risks of depression, depending on which method you're using. If you're using the IUD, that works by adding inflammation to the uterus. And when we're adding inflammation to an open wound, that just doesn't sound like a good idea, right? For healing overall. And then pregnancy is a very nutritionally depleting activity, right? Your body gives the nutrients that it needs to the baby. It prioritizes the baby over you, really nutritionally. A lot of postpartum women, if you look at them, they'll have gray or clear teeth. That's one of the first signs that, hey, you didn't have enough minerals. So your body literally took them from your teeth to give them to the baby. So when we take that nutritionally depleted state and then we add birth control, which most podcast listeners, I'm assuming, know, is going to further deplete you. We're just, adding insult to injury, basically, with the hormonal
Yeah.
birth control.
And quick clarification when you're talking about the IUD adding to inflammation is that both IUDs, the copper IUD and the hormonal IUD, or are you referring to any particular type?
Yeah, any IUD in the uterus, either as an intended effect or as a side effect, will cause inflammation. That's just the nature of having something in your body. Your body sees it as
Yeah.
foreign, it
So
will
I think
cause.
that's important because, from my perspective too, just knowing the hormonal IUD, it does still contain hormones. So that's important for women to consider. And I talk about that. And the
Mhm.
copper IUD is something that it can cause high copper, and that in and of itself can cause inflammation, which is why it's so important to test your copper levels with someone like myself. It's
Yeah.
typically not something that your OB or your doctor is going to test, you on. And related to that too, like with mineral repletion or depletion rather, and imbalances, I want to call out that I have had I don't see this personally a lot because I don't work with postpartum women as much. I work with women more of like who are prepping to optimize their fertility and come off birth control for healthy conception. However, I've had some colleagues in that space who they've seen through HTMA tests and copper testing that women um, post pregnancy and having the baby, they have had really high levels of copper because their body is just like giving that
Mhm.
copper away. Their body like kind of does this thing where it bounces really high. So that's really, really important because copper, if we have too much or too little of that, that can impact our mood as well. So when we think about postpartum depression, that in and of itself is a risk, as well as nutrient depletion. So calcium and magnesium are more calming minerals. And so when you are, giving more
More.
of that to baby, then, and when your needs are higher, I think if we need to call it too, like if you're breastfeeding, or just postpartum in general, like you're not just bouncing back from not having the baby inside of you anymore. Still, like you need to nourish your body very intentionally to replete those minerals. But, those are things that it's really, really important to make for sure that you're getting enough through food and then oftentimes through targeted supplements, like continuing your prenatal things like that.
Yeah, and I think like one that the medical community does like reiterate is just iron stores. Like it takes 6 to 12 months just to rebuild iron stores alone. So it is important to say, hey, I shouldn't get pregnant, 6 months after being pregnant. So it's like this conversation is important to say, yes, you do have options, but also, hey, you really should take care of your
Yep.
body.
Yeah, and tell us a little bit about the your version of the fertility awareness method because we spoke when we first connected, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you do things a little bit different than what we've had Vicky Shahadi on here, who teaches the fertility awareness method as well. But you were trained in a different version of it, right?
Yeah. So there's lots of different fertility awareness methods. You have basically your mucus only methods. You have your hormonal methods, which sometimes add something else in, but you're testing urinary hormones. And then you have symptothermal, which is probably what most people know. That's when you're taking your body temperature and you're tracking something else along with it. So for postpartum, for high efficacy studies, all we have is mucus only or urinary hormones. If she teaches FEM, that's going to be, I think they technically, I forget what they categorize themselves as. They're like a combination method. So they're going to do mucus and hormonal testing, usually, is what FEM will do. But they don't have any postpartum studies. So it's like you could do it postpartum, but they're usually borrowing the method from or rules from one of these other methods that do have postpartum studies. So I teach a mucus only method for postpartum, which is called the Billings ovulation method. The other method that has postpartum studies is called Marquette method, which is a hormonal method. So you take urinary hormones every morning. But you have to be a nurse to teach Marquette. So I cannot teach Marquette.
So with the mucus only, so tell us the benefits of using that postpartum and why versus why some of the FEM methods maybe you can't it's not as reliable.
Yeah. So the main issue with postpartum is a lot of times different methods of fertility awareness are looking for a post ovulation sign, like basal body temperature, right? Basal body temperature only rises after ovulation. So we need to catch prior to ovulation, which means we have to be using an estrogenic sign. So how we track that ovulation is about to happen is we watch for rising estrogen. So either, right, you're sampling your urinary hormones to say, oh, estrogen is rising, or you're watching cervical mucus. Because as the body releases estrogen, as your follicles are developing, it causes a response in the cervix where we get more and more fertile types of mucus. The other main reason that makes something like Billings better is we have a much more flexible, what's called a basic infertile pattern. So, a lot of other methods, the only option to be considered infertile postpartum is if you're seeing like white mucus. Like, that's the only option that's considered infertile. Everything else is considered fertile. And that's not the reality for a lot of clients, like myself included. That is, I see clear every day of postpartum. So it's always going to be considered fertile in other methods just because of the way their rules work. Because Billings is a little bit more flexible, we're able to say, oh, even though that's clear, that's still part of your basic infertile pattern. So it's a really good method for people who have continuous discharge, which can happen any sort of elevated estrogen state. Like pregnancy, your estrogen was really high. That response can be seen in your cervix for months afterwards, or people that have PCOS, things like that. It can be a really
Okay.
good method.
Yeah, speak a little bit more to that. So if we take, even if we're, because I do have clients who, have PCOS and they're learning the fertility awareness method, because same old story. They were told take birth control, it'll balance your hormones, and PCOS, and it doesn't. It makes things worse in the long run. But so you're saying that this method is beneficial for those with PCOS specifically too.
I like it. So I, for example, will have random long cycles. I probably have undiagnosed PCOS, but I don't meet the criteria for it. So the reason I really like Billings for PCOS is there's no calendar rules. So when you have really, really long cycles, we can see, oh, there was a wave of follicular development. It ended. Now you still have availability because your body gave up trying to ovulate. Whereas most methods are going to incorporate some sort of calendar rule or just a rule that as soon as you have a wave of follicular development, you have to wait till you ovulate, even if that's 90 days from now, which can happen in PCOS cycles, right? You can have a 90-day cycle. So with Billings, we're able to say, all right, that wave of follicular development gave up. You have availability for intercourse again until your body
Okay.
tries again to ovulate. So it can just give you more availability with something like
That
PCOS. The other thing with PCOS is you can have positive LH tests all the time or like never get a positive LH test because of just the way PCOS works. It messes with your LH response. So something like FEM is not always great unless you have a really savvy instructor who like can help walk you through that. But if you're not working with someone one-on-one, LH tests can really be a problem with PCOS because you don't trust them. And that's reasonable because your body's making different levels of them. So LH is not always
Yeah.
the best thing with
That's
PCOS.
that's really interesting because I just had someone over the weekend reach out to me about she essentially had got pregnant by surprise, and she had, it sounds like, been using some form of fertility awareness method where she was using the LH testing strips and like tracking ovulation and all that kind of stuff, but still got pregnant. So I'm going to tell her to listen to this episode because it sounds like this is, I mean, one, the importance of not doing it on your own, especially if you had that happen before, outsourcing that to a professional. And then two, looking at all like other ways of doing it. Cause I didn't even know that there were like even differences within the fem methods.
Yeah, yeah. So mm, there's like 7 religious methods and like 3 secular methods, I think, off the top of my head. I will give you the link in the show notes, but Read Your Body has a really good breakdown of all of the methods. They talk about what your choices are, and then they have an instructor database. So, like, you can look for instructors that meet basically your needs, your desires. Like, hey, I am religious, I want a religious instructor. Hey, I'm not religious, I don't want a religious instructor. Hey, I am using fertility awareness methods with condoms. Some instructors will work with that, some won't. So Read Your Body is a really good option to like figure out an instructor
I
or
love
a
that.
method that fits you. Because like I have used 3 different methods over my course of fertility awareness. And each one had a good spot in my life, and others, it was like, all right, this is not working for my lifestyle right now. We need to find
Mhm.
something that does work. Like taking your temperature in the morning as a mom is impossible. Like because your kids are coming into your room. You have to get out of bed and feed them, or you didn't sleep all night because your kids were waking you up, whatever. So finding a method that works for your life is really important because you shouldn't just quit because it's not
Yeah.
working because there are
Yeah,
other
I'm so glad that you highlighted that because I have clients who similar, the temperature is really, really hard for them. With the women my clients I'm thinking of, they're actually
yeah.
younger, in college slash just graduated working, and they really struggle with,
Mm,
one, getting up in time to eat breakfast, nourish themselves, get out the door, let alone,
yeah.
like, taking their temperature and doing that, and I had one client who was like, "This is just adding more stress to my day," and I was like, "We don't want that." So, yes,
Mhm.
we will put that link in the show notes.
Yeah. And right, you can do an Aura Ring, Apple Watch, or Temp Drop, which if you want, I have a 15% off code, a Temp Drop. That's an option. So there are options to get around the temperature thing if you still want to take it, but it's not feasible for some
Mhm.
people, and that's okay. Which is why mucus only methods like Billings are good, or even Marquette, which all you have to do is check your hormones every single morning. Well, every single morning when you're postpartum, it's a little bit different when you're cycling. The only problem with Marquette is it can get a little expensive. So, like, you have to be willing to pay for the test strips. It's not too bad in normal cycles, but postpartum, you go through a box a month, which can range anywhere from 30 to like $80 a month. So,
Yeah.
not in
Yeah.
everyone's budget,
Mhm.
which is totally reasonable, but that can work for people. It just
Mhm.
finding
Yep,
what works for your
absolutely.
life.
All about individualization, which is really, really important. Like, what works for you is not gonna work for someone else, and also, like you mentioned, like, different seasons of your life, it's gonna look different, so we need to figure out a way to accommodate that.
Yeah.
What are some other things when someone is postpartum? We talked about pregnancy spacing. What are some other things that that you talk to your clients about, or the women that you're seeing about?
Yeah, so I am very big on postpartum nourishment anyways. So I end up kind of basically a food doula a lot of times. So I do a lot of meal prep for my clients because if you're not eating well, like you're just setting yourself up for failure, right? The gut microbiome is extra sensitive postpartum. So when you're in the hospital and you're ordering Taco Bell because that's your option, you're setting yourself up for failure. And then suddenly, because your microbiome is baby's microbiome, then they're all gassy, fussy, eczema, etc., because you're not treating yourself well. So we do a lot of like, trying to eat foods that are easily digestible, that are nutrient dense, so I do a lot of that with postpartum clients. And then my mentality pretty much is always like mom first. Like everybody wants to take care of the baby postpartum, but if we don't take care of the mom, then baby's not going to be taken care of. Like once mom is well cared for, then the baby comes easily and naturally. So like my focus is always very mom centric of like what does mom need to be successful postpartum? Not hey, you need to go over and hold the baby. Maybe that's what mom needs, but maybe what she needs is something else, and we should kinda take those needs first because maybe she just needs to hold her baby all the time because she's struggling to establish breastfeeding or something like that. So that's very much my
Mhm.
postpartum doula
So do
mentality.
you see a lot of women, I'm imagining I know the answer, but who do not put their needs before baby because maybe they have like mom guilt, or they feel like they should put the baby first versus their own needs?
My favorite to talk to are actually, like, second-time moms because they're like, "Oh, wait, you mean, like, things would have been better if I had done it that way the first time around?" Those are the ones that are usually more aware of it, right? First-time moms, some of them are really aware, and that's great, but it's the second-time moms that are like, "Yeah, it was awful because I didn't take care of myself, and then I felt like crap." And then when you're chasing a toddler and a baby, like, it's suddenly so much worse. That are the grandmas. They're my favorite, is when you have the supportive grandmas who are like, "I wish I had known this 30 years ago," or, "I'm actually going to take care of my daughter because nobody took care of
Yep.
me."
Yeah. Yeah, and I love what you said about, because I'm talking with clients. Again, I see more of the younger clients who maybe, don't necessarily have kids yet. They're being proactive with it. But with my moms that I do
Yeah.
work with, we talk a lot about how most of them, by the time they get to me, they've put their needs on the back burner. And that's why they're seeing me, because they're body and their hormones are seeing those
Yeah.
repercussions. So I'm always so, so happy when women invest in themselves in that way, whether it's working with someone like you, someone like me, you know, prioritizing things, or maybe it's hiring a house cleaner so to offset something, or maybe it's, you know, doing meal delivery services, whatever that is. I think it's so, so important for women to know like that's not being selfish, that's taking care of yourself and knowing that this is a season. I think that's so, so important of like, this is a season of your life
Yeah.
postpartum that it's going to look different and things are going to be messier and it's not always going to be like that.
Well, and like you were talking about those moms, all right, how many, pregnancies have they been through that have nutritionally depleted them? How many years have they been on birth control in between those pregnancies? Like their body just didn't have a chance to catch up. So if they're just eating their toddler's table scraps, which like we've all done as moms, right? We just eat our toddler scraps, whatever. Yeah, you're not going to feel good, like because you haven't taken the time to just sit down and eat foods that your
Mhm.
body
Yep.
needs.
Yeah, and one of the biggest things from a nutrition standpoint, speaking of that, that you can do is a lot of times, OBs and doctors will say, well, just take a multivitamin, take a prenatal. Yes, but first of all, you need to make sure you're taking a good prenatal. So I'm going to drop the link below to my favorite one, which is
Yeah.
oh my gosh, Full Well. I use Full Well. Yeah, I think it's Full Well. I'm going to drop it below. I use that, and then there's Full Script is I use her.
There's a lot of
There's a lot of
bad
bad
ones out
ones,
there,
yeah.
let's put it
So
that
Full
way.
Well is my favorite one, and that has lots of
Yeah.
whole food nutrition, a lot of things that a lot of, prenatals don't have. So I would recommend that one, that's my absolute favorite one, and then another thing you can do is mineral mocktails. So I'll drop my free mineral mocktail guide below too if you want to do that.
Mhm.
I would say, like, postpartum, 2 mineral mocktails a day is ideal, and you can add, like, collagen to it or make sure you're having it with a protein-rich meal so it's not spiking your blood sugar, but getting a combination of sodium, potassium, vitamin C, and some magnesium is so, so helpful for sleep, for energy, for nervous system, for metabolism, for your thyroid,
Yeah.
literally everything, and it's a great way to replenish minerals and hydrate yourself, and it's easy, it's low cost, it's something that you can do, so I'll drop that below too.
Yeah, collagen is actually one of my favorites, both for fertility clients and for postpartum moms, because either I have the clients who don't eat breakfast and then they wonder why their luteal phase is terrible. Like I see that, I don't know, that is the most common thing I see. And I'm like, okay, even if you don't want to eat breakfast, can you just like throw the collagen in your coffee, please, like something?
Yep.
And it improves greatly. That or the busy like mom who's just like you're struggling to eat in between nursing the baby or whatever. And it's like, okay, I would rather you eat food first, but if we could just add some collagen to whatever it is you're already drinking, you can't taste it. At least you're
Yep.
getting 10 to 20 grams of protein. So like that and it aids in general recovery of all your tissues postpartum. So like that is one of my favorite supplement tricks to at least
Yeah.
get
Yeah, I'm a big
something
fan
in.
of, especially if breakfast is hard, doing the collagen in coffee and then adding some, like, cream or some milk or something just for some healthy fats, like,
Yeah.
that's super easy,
Yep.
you don't really need to change your routine with that.
Yeah. The other big obvious one postpartum that I just thought of is, right, your choline needs increase greatly in pregnancy, and that's one that's not in a lot of prenatals. But then they potentially increase even more when you're breastfeeding. So is there a way to get eggs in your body, right? Is it an option? Which I know that's, of course, the most common childhood allergy. So a lot of moms end up having to give it up postpartum, which is just like, right, that's just painful to have higher needs and then give it up because your baby's allergic. But that's another one where it's like eggs aren't difficult to make. They're pretty fast. Maybe that's something that you can
Yep,
find ways to
and the
throw
Full Well
in.
prenatal does have choline in it too, so that's exactly what you said, like, making sure you're
Yeah.
doing a quality prenatal. I would not recommend one, from, like, Walmart or CVS. Unless you have a recommendation, I've yet to find one that I actually like
No.
from there. I prefer using Full Script, medical grade supplement company, or, like I said, Full Well is my favorite, so
Yeah, and I mean, full script anyways makes you feel safer these days with all of the, like, sawdust that they keep finding in them, so it's like, yeah, you don't wanna be dealing with that when you're pregnant or postpartum, like, just
yeah,
buy the
it's
better
worth,
supplement.
even if it's a little bit pricier. I mean, it's really not that much more pricey, but if you're paying for shipping versus, getting it at Walmart or something, like, you don't wanna waste money on something that you're not getting anything
Yeah.
from it. You're just getting expensive pee at this point.
Well, Right, and if you have an HSA, you
Mhm.
can use that on
Yep.
full script
Yep.
too, which is
Yeah,
nice,
and you
that
might be able to
helps.
use that with Fullwell, with the prenatal too. You have to check, but you might be able to with them.
Probably, most of them do, but, like, yeah, that's just one to check, but I know full script lets
Yeah.
you use your
Yep.
HSA.
So, are there any other things that we didn't touch on that you think is important to know in a woman's journey postpartum?
So, the other, like, big one that you see on the internet or your provider may or may not tell you about is lactation amenorrhea. So, inherently, when you're breastfeeding, your body releases prolactin, which suppresses the rise of FSH, which means your body won't start to stimulate follicles, so you won't ovulate. So, that's how breastfeeding works to suppress ovulation. But there are some criteria to it that I find a lot of medical professionals even get wrong. It has to be direct nursing. Some people produce prolactin or sufficient prolactin when they're pumping, some don't. So, unfortunately, if you're pumping, that's not guaranteed to have the same like pregnancy spacing effects. That nursing has to be every 4 hours during the day, 6 hours at night. Baby has to be under 6 months old, and you cannot have any bleeding past 56 days. The reason for that is generally within the first 6 months, if you have a bleed, it's going to be anovulatory. So even though you're having a bleed, you didn't ovulate before it, so there's not a chance of getting pregnant. After 6 months, that changes. You're probably going to ovulate before you bleed. So we really need to be watching either with a fertility awareness method, or if you choose oral contraceptives or an IUD, after 6 months, you're probably going to ovulate. So you need to be doing something to pregnancy space if that's your goal. Once you have a bleed, though, even within those 6 months, generally ovulation follows it. So any bleeding, then we need to watch for sign of ovulation. And that's going to be anywhere from 98 to 99.5% effective. So breastfeeding can be effective to avoid pregnancy, but you have to follow that criteria. Otherwise, that's when we really need to introduce a fertility awareness method. And you can even introduce it before, right? You could still use lactation amenorrhea for those first 6 months. Again, it pretty much only works if you're a stay-at-home mom, though, because you have to be nursing, not pumping. So it's not for everyone. Generally, at least 2 weeks before you start work is where I would like to introduce FAM. So that's a good time to start charting, is about 2 weeks before you return to work or return to pumping, anything like that. So as soon as you're not meeting that lactational amenorrhea protocol, that's where we would want to introduce a
Yeah,
fertility awareness
those are
method.
good points. And I appreciate how you called out you can be bleeding but not ovulating, and vice versa. You can ovulate without
Yes.
bleeding too. That was something I didn't know.
So I see a decent amount of
Mhm.
anovulatory bleeds. And that's like one of the other things with LH tests is you can have a luteinized unruptured follicle, which just add more confusion because you can get a positive LH test and not ovulate, but it can be luteinized, which can cause a temperature shift. So like there's all sorts of intricacies in here, which is why it's so important to work with a trained instructor, especially if you don't have like
Mhm.
textbook cycles. Even textbook cycles, I think it's on average, women can have like one anovulatory cycle a year. So it's like, if you're serious, if you go look at the data, all of the studies that are showing that 98 to 99, whatever percent of efficacy is you working with a trained instructor because like we've put in the hours to
Mhm.
understand all this other stuff. So that's like, and postpartum especially, it's difficult. It's
Yeah.
not the time to
Yeah, and I think
DIY.
that now is a good time to call out that it doesn't mean that you have to work with an instructor for the rest of your life. It's really to help give you a tool to learn your own
No.
cycle because, like, let's be honest, we never
Yeah.
learned how to track our own cycle. That's something that we in my opinion, and I'm sure yours too,
No.
like, we should have been taught at a very early age instead of, like, push birth control as, like, that or abstinence as being, like, the only ways for women to prevent pregnancy, when in reality, we just
Yeah.
it's truly just, like, taking a step back and, like, learning what our cycle is doing and learning our patterns, and then also through different seasons of life, like, getting additional support when it is trickier, it's less, uh linear, I guess. It's more like up and down with the shifts in your hormones and your body as it's recovering postpartum. So it's I want women to look at this as like this is a tool that will set you up for success in the long run
Yes.
without the long-term ramifications of relying on birth control, which in and of itself have long-term consequences on your body, your mental health, etc.
Yeah, so the studies are usually about 3 months with an instructor. And that's basically just saying, A, they taught you, and B, they're reviewing your charts to make sure you're actually doing it correctly and you didn't misunderstand the rules. Or make sure there's not something
Mhm.
funny going on in your charts, because that happens all the time. And I totally agree. Like, I wish someone would have taught me this as a teenager because I had irregular cycles. So, like, I never knew, was my period coming at 25 days or was it coming at 45 days? And if I had known to track ovulation, right, it never would have been a surprise. And it's the same thing postpartum, right? Everyone's so worried about when they'll get their first postpartum period. If it's anovulatory, right, you're not going to get a warning of that. But if you're past the 6 months, if you're tracking ovulation, you're going to know, all right, I have a period coming up. I'm not going to be surprised by that, which I never want, right? I don't want you to be surprised by your period.
Mhm.
It eliminates that fear, which is one of the best
Yeah.
parts, I think, about
Yeah, and
fertility
the
awareness
fear of
methods.
maybe unwanted pregnancy at that point if you're not looking to get pregnant again. Like, I think that's a huge thing is I'm
Yeah.
very loud in advocating about, like, if you don't wanna get pregnant, but you wanna stop birth control, like, there are other methods, and it's worth investing in a coach who teaches it,
Yeah.
which is why I connect with people like you to show women that, this is really, really important. It's like going back to school, going back to health class, things we should have learned in health class, like, in high school, but
Mhm.
unfortunately didn't to, like, learn
Yeah.
our own bodies.
Yeah. And that's the most common response I get is why did no one ever tell me this? Like, that's what most of my clients say. And it's like,
Yeah, I
I wish they
agree,
had.
and it's because our health education is not the greatest, especially from a female perspective, 100%.
Right. And our moms didn't know. Like, we can't blame them. They did
Mhm.
no one told
Yeah.
them
Oh,
either.
yeah, 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 and I think it's just a testament to more women are speaking out about this, and more women are learning that there are other options, so I'm
Mhm.
very confident that future generations, they will have this education sooner because of women like us
Yeah.
and, people that we are helping to learn about this sooner, even if it is, like, in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, that way they can pass this information along, and future generations of women will not, have to go
Yeah.
through the same thing where they're learning about this and they're like, late 20s, early 30s, like I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah. Our daughters don't have to
Yeah.
be surprised about their
Yep.
periods,
Yep.
right?
Or
That's the
forced to
goal.
choose birth control, like, as their only option.
For acne at
Oh, yeah.
14, right?
Acne, painful periods, missing periods. It's really given as, like, the only
Yeah.
option, which is, obviously why I do what I do.
Yes. And I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your work.
So, where can women find you and connect with you? And remind me, do you offer virtual support as well?
Yes. So honestly, most of my postpartum clients are postpartum fertility clients are virtual. Sometimes I do the first session in person if they're local, but then because we end up lots of like 15-minute chart reviews,
Hmm.
virtual just makes sense. So I'm at Mothering Method on Instagram or motheringmethod.com, and you can email me, Abigail at
Awesome. And we'll put all those
motheringmethod.com.
links in the show notes as well for people to connect with you. So, really, I am going to be referring to you as the postpartum expert for fertility awareness method, and all the things
Love
related
it.
to recovering postpartum and, whether your goal is to get pregnant again, to prevent pregnancy in the future, or just heal, after having a baby and going through that life event. I think you're the go to woman to help support women with that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
And thank
of
you for your
course. This
time
is so,
today.
so helpful. I know so many women are going to really benefit from hearing this. Again, even if it's not that they're going through this currently, maybe they went through this in the past and they can pass this information along, or they are looking ahead. Most of the women that I work with are very proactive and health conscious. And
Hmm.
so I have a lot of women who are listening who are like, I'm not there yet, but I want to plan ahead for that so I can set myself up and my family and my baby for
Yeah.
success. So amazing. So to finish off,
Yes.
tell us
Love
a little
that.
bit about how you are nourishing yourself in this season of life.
Yeah. So, I mean, I am probably like many people on my own journey to improve my cycle. So, you know, dealt with all of that for my teenage and early 20s. So a lot of, okay, hey, I need to work on my blood sugar regulation. Hey, I need to actually, get fiber and things like that. So right now it's a lot of practicing what I preach, right? And trying to make those steps to improve my cycle. And I have seen like my periods barely bother me, which is like fantastic because that was not my reality in my early 20s, right? I had painful periods before I had kids. So really just working on, okay, I know these things that will help me cycle well and implementing them for myself, like yeah, I hate having to eat breakfast in the morning, but I know the consequences of not eating it and how much better I feel when
Yeah,
I
so really
do.
supporting your blood sugar because that has a downstream effect with your hormones, your gut, your mood, your energy,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. And it starts with the basics that are sometimes the hardest to do.
Yeah, especially as a mom. I get it. It's hard, but it's like if you don't do it and then your periods suck, it's like, okay, well,
Yep. Yeah,
they
I
led
know
to
it's
be.
sometimes hard to think about that in the moment, but reminding yourself, like, why are you doing this hard thing can be really helpful because it's going to suck even more when you're a mom on a horrible period.
Yeah. Yeah, your toddler doesn't let you lay in bed with a heat pack on your stomach for some reason. Like they're just not fans of that.
Yes, yes. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. And if you are listening to this and you found this helpful, please leave a 5-star review, leave a comment. Leave a comment on Instagram if you're seeing this or on YouTube. We would love to hear from you. It's so, so helpful. And until next time, stay nourished, friends.